it's good. All right, so I apologize for that. Just a shout out, both Christy Carnahan and Kate Doyle, Kate's on the phone, have been kind of mentors for me on this. They've been doing micro-teaching, so they've really been very helpful. So we wanted to do this in our methods course. So given time to plan and a phone to video, students were to implement an evidence-based strategy for academic content at the peers instructional level by planning the strategy using explicit instruction with 1 or 2 peers, self-assessing it alone, and then with peers by the end of the learning segment, and be prepared to replicate the process in another course. So move to the next slide, if you would. Yeah, so it basically had these 3 functions to it. There was a planning phase, and this was done very explicit. I was modeling this along the way in all the phases. So planning was, had to describe what micro-teaching was, I modeled it, a micro-teaching event that took 16 minutes, and then I provided in-class guided practice as students were planning. And then during the implementation phase, which we just finished yesterday, I can't even tell you how excited I am about this, that it worked so well, so powerful. I can see why micro-teaching has an effect size of 0.88. Small teams with presenters, students in their videographer. They had 30 minutes to kind of set up, videotape, and then transition to another group. Most of them took, between 12 and 15 minutes. And then the reflection phase we're just now running into. It involves a running record. There's a picture of that coming up. Some metacognitive work that they do with the running record. They then select a 5 to 7 minute segment of their micro-teaching to share with a peer, and then they together complete what we call a collaborative assessment log. And then at the end, that's what they submit, these 3 things to me. So yeah, next slide. Yeah, thank you. So the planning was, I took for this first time, and the students were excited about it as well, and told me I need to do more of it next year, which I will. But this first time, they really appreciated that me giving them time in class to prepare these things. So we had 2 days. The first day was really doing a lot of background knowledge on what is micro-teaching and what is explicit instruction, that kind of thing. Then students were given opportunities to plan right inside the course to select an evidence-based. We use Fisher-Fry Hattie's visual learning for visual literacy learning textbook. So they pick us something from that and then use explicit instruction to teach that to a couple peers. Yeah, thank you. So one of the things I learned about this planning phase is that when the candidates realized that they were to perform a micro-teaching lesson, their level of engagement shot through the roof, increased when I was comparing that to submitting another kind of assignment that had similar objectives. So it had that was so evident as to why micro-teaching is so powerful, is that it has this engagement level. One of the behavioral changes that were evident during the planning session was the number of detailed questions candidates asked about what to do and how to do it. And their questions helped me realize that modeling an explicit instruction event with an academic practice would be crucial. And so I did a modeling of question asking using explicit instruction with a peer talking about authentic Texas brisket. And that was really a fun lesson.
How to make it?
How to make it, yes.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Okay, I need that recipe.
Yes, I will share that with you. So during the implementation, also given 2 days, given 2 35-minute segments of a lesson plan, a recording device, and needed materials, 100% of the students were able to implement and videotape a lesson with 2 peers by performing the explicit instruction steps for a specific strategy. And then the supports were the video recording. They had to kind of schedule who goes first, second, third. We had to talk about contingencies around space and noise in the classroom. Within the groups, strategy couldn't be repeated. So there are 4 students. They had to have 4 different academic evidence-based practices so that they could see a lot of different practices within a group. Go ahead and click forward, please. Okay, so the reflection phase, that's what we're just entering that. We'll do that next week. So you're really, this is hot off the press in a sense. So given the recorded micro-teaching segments, a rubric, and a collaborative assessment log, students are going to be able to evaluate their own teaching with a critical collaboration of peers by completing a running record, reflection questions, and the collaborative assessment log. And I will, again, on Tuesday, I'll model that reflection because our students are quite averse to making truly critical comments of their peers. So we're going to try to model that so they touch on that a little bit, so we get past the unqualified praise statements they like to give each other.
Steve, could you give us an example of some of the practices that the candidates taught? Jenny asked that in the chat. Yeah,
great question. So they had to pick an evidence-based practice from the text, for example. So they might use, for one of them, we're interested in reciprocal teaching. So I told them, I said, you're not gonna be able to teach all 4 parts of reciprocal teaching, so pick one of those skills. And so they picked summarizing. So that's what they focused on there. Another student focused on how to use mnemonics in a lesson. Another one was how to use Cornell note-taking strategy, that kind of stuff. So so there were a number of strategies like that. I'd be happy to share a big list of the ones that they used. They had to show me the effect size of the practice and why they were using it with the particular content, that kind of thing.
That's a really nice example of how you're blending high leverage practices and evidence-based practices. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that really helped us understand, get past that kind of confusion of distinguishing the two things. So using a high leverage practice like explicit instruction to teach an academic evidence-based practice that's really specific to an academic task. Yeah. So let's see. So what did we learn from the reflection phase? Well, that's going to happen next week. But I know from, as you all know from previous experience, that microteaching is very public, and candidates complete running record with metacognitive comments, then engage in a critical peer reflection. So you probably I don't know if you can see that very closely, but that reflection phase, the running record is that middle column. Well, let me start. On the left is the minute. So that's 1 minute in a video clip. And number 2 is the second minute in a video clip. And then down that middle column, they have to actually kind of describe what's happening inside the video. And then on the right side, they have to begin to point out what's happening inside what's happening. So for example, they have to say, well, I'm using a visual schedule, and explain why you're using a visual schedule. Well, because it reduces anxiety, it helps transition, all that kind of stuff. And so at each stage, they start to see kind of background schema or knowledge around what's happening inside of a teaching event.
Oh, Kina made a comment that I think is great, and especially if you haven't seen the Kansas content enhancement routines, they're really wonderful. That this would be so helpful in teaching those content enhancement routines.
No, nice. Great. The next slide, I guess.
Okay,
it's on. There we are. Yeah, we're at the collaborative assessment log. So this Hollins really inspired us for this. We used to ask, what went well, what didn't go well, what are next steps? And that really always left us very flat. We adopted some of her questions. And this question, the first one is, did the students reach the objective? And what evidence do you have? So that's what you do in that first block. And then the second columns in between kind of do a more close analysis. On the left-hand column, you got how specifically do you know the student struggled, and then they have to really articulate that stuff. And if they didn't struggle, they have to tell me why they didn't struggle and what was the evidence of that. So they had to kind of break down those questions. And then that middle column, and this is, I love the middle column because it says, what did you learn about your students? And then that second question, how will you incorporate that knowledge about your students in future lessons? And then the third column is what kind of collaboration took place in this lesson. And at the bottom, you see, okay, so what are your takeaways? And for me, this was mine, and I was trying to model this thing. So I had 3 things. I looked at my own video, my micro teaching. I said, there are 3 things I missed that I want to do better next time. I want to ask earlier. Have you? The guy's name was Andy. I said, Andy, have you used question asking? That was my strategy. And at the outset, I would have done more with, let's look at the structure of the text, how it's set up with information analysis. And then the third thing would be, I'd be more explicit about how to chunk text in more appropriate ways, depending on who the reader was, that kind of thing. So that's done collaboratively. So they do the running record by themselves, and then they come back into the closed classroom with their team of 4, and then they fill this collaborative assessment log out. And they've got a rubric that they're looking at together. That's not on here. I can share that as well.
Steve, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I was wondering about, since it's their peers, do the peers pretend like they're students? Like, do they purposely do things that cause the candidate who's teaching to have to think about, oh, how am I going to handle that situation? Or how do they approximate more what students might do?
Yes, that is such a great question. So this is one of the outcomes, and I was just interviewing the class yesterday morning when we did the final thing. And I told them, I said, you can do this either way. You can teach this at the peer level, or you guys can role play a 2nd grader or a 3rd grader, that kind of thing, however you want to do that. And they had so much anxiety around doing it in the first place that I didn't want to create too much of that situation, although that was happening. You can see some of them actually chose to do that. But in my interviewing, debriefing with them at the end of class, they said, we could definitely do that at a more challenging level the 2nd and 3rd time that we do the micro teaching. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to design 3 micro teaching events across the course, 1 for surface learning, 1 for deep learning, 1 for transfer learning. And we're going to make those more complex, because it was very clear that they were mastering this and feeling a lot of confidence by the end of this very first time for them to do that.
Oh, that's great.
Yes, so there's a question here. Is the assessment log done by each candidate but discussed as a group, or 1 log per collaborative group? So every student completes their own running record, and then every student also completes with their group a learning log, and then they kind of go in a circle. So all 4 students will have 4 completely distinct learning logs around their own micro teaching experience.
Lisa White pointed out that this would be a great tool for in-service teachers too, as well. Oh,
absolutely. Yes, the micro teaching, the evidence of this thing is absolutely amazing when you start reading the studies. The evidence suggests that it was designed out in Stanford about in the late 60s. This thing's been around, so there's like over 200 studies on this thing, and they're suggesting that even when you do it in this controlled setting, it has a pretty important impact on people. So I'm impressed with it, and I can see why that after having done this like this, I can't believe I haven't done it before. I'm just an idiot. So, anyway, so it's really neat. I'm really excited about kind of digging this into the practice more.
Absolutely.
I think that's it. Is there another one? Oh, that's where Socratic method. This is my dream. They want to be off the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. It was planned for that, where I kind of give them the space. I said, I want you all to be in charge of a conversation where you talk about your own learning questions that you have without me facilitating that. So we do a little bit of training around Socratic seminar, and some training on how to yield the floor, how to generate questions, how to move past your own shyness, because you always have those 3 or 4 students who will kind of control that whole group conversation. So hopefully we'll have time to do that. I'm pretty sure we'll have some kind of time for that. So that'd be kind of a culminating moment for the kind of bring the whole learning experience back for everybody.
Steve, what's the happy birthday rule?
Oh, yeah, so yielding the floor, I forget where I was reading this. So if you've spoken and there's silence on the floor, you have to happy birthday, a full yourself before you say anything. And that gives you enough, I think it's about 20 seconds to do that before you can talk. And that usually gives enough wait time for someone who's a little more reticent to share to actually pipe up a little bit.
Nice.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have a question. Kim asked, and actually, Kim, I had the same thought. She said, could you remind us the point in the program where your students are who are doing this activity, and have they taken methods courses yet?
They've taken some. This is their juniors in their so it's the first year of their professional cohort. So they've had 2 years of they take their academic stuff, but they've all had 2 different field experiences. But here they have a practicum experience that's simultaneous with the class. So they're all in urban settings, so they're. We were thinking about how do you transfer this into that setting, but our schools are just way too jammed for their schedule to actually do that in a dependable way. Some of them could, but not all of them. So we're this is a methods course, but they're also in Ohio. They have to take 12 hours of reading, and this is just one of them.
Okay.
So Steve, I wanted to comment on the fact that one of the things you're doing here and that you could remind candidates of is you're really helping them learn how to collaborate with each other.
Absolutely, yes. Great point.
And these skills that they're learning in the Socratic seminar are the same skills they need to learn when they're out in the schools working with families and other professionals.
Absolutely.
So this is where the HLPs are kind of crossing over each other a little bit too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It really very much so. It's just been a wonderful kind of experiment to do this, especially having a couple colleagues, Kate and Christy, who I could say, okay, this is happening. What's going on here? I'd send my goal over to Kate, and she'd say, well, tweak it this way. So it created a nice synergy in the faculty too. That's probably the last slide. Is it the last slide? I think it is. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's it. So thank you all for listening. I was very excited to share with you.